I head towards my 8th period class with a stack of binders in my hands and a Chromebook strapped on my arms. I walked into the room, slowly took the assigned reading passage, found my desk, and threw the binders on the floor. After I finished reading the text, the teacher walked to the front of the room and asked the class to identify the conflict. I looked around and began to realize I was the only person who wasn't raising my hand. My classmates started staring at me like I was some sort of idiot, but in reality, I had the answer right in my brain, and there was no way I was going to raise my hand that day. I knew the answer, so why didn't I speak out? Was I afraid my classmates would make fun of me if I answered this wrong? Was I not paying attention to what the teacher said? The reason why I didn't answer the question was due to my introverted personality. Good morning, my name is Eric Liu, and I'm gonna talk to you today about the undervaluing of the very thing our society needs. Now, unfortunately, introversion is such a misunderstood topic that it will take a lot of unnecessary detail to paint a proper picture on it. Even Google can't produce a proper definition for it. So what is an introvert? Contrary to popular belief, the difference between introverts and extroverts is not that introverts prefer solitude, while extroverts prefer social environments. The term introvert was popularized in the early 1900s by Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, who is also an introvert himself. And he himself said the difference between introverts and extroverts was actually an introvert's preference for less stimulating environments. For example, while an extrovert may enjoy staying up until midnight partying, an introvert may feel overwhelmed and need to take a rest if they were to do the same thing. Some basic traits of an introvert may possess are being reserved, thoughtful, and secretive, but these are traits that an introvert may or may not possess. However, there is one criteria a person has to meet to even begin to consider themselves an introvert, and that is that they are more concerned with their own thoughts and feelings rather than what goes around them. Now, we are all introverted in some way or another, and introversion and extroversion isn't just black and white. It is a spectrum, and people lie on different parts of the spectrum depending on the amount of socialization they need. Although introverts make up half the human population, it often doesn't seem that way. Our society, the American society, places a greater value on one type of individual, the type of individual that is friendly rather than aloof, confident rather than timid, decisive rather than second-guessing, and action-oriented rather than contemplative. These are all qualities that an extrovert possesses, and due to the image that has been ingrained to many of our minds, we often undervalue introverts, and to consider them to be less capable than extroverts. However, introverts also have many strengths that we tend to overlook. A 2012 study showed that spending just 4 days in a quiet setting could improve creative problem-solving skills by over 50%. Introverts have very creative minds, which is no surprise, as creativity is fueled by deep thought and contemplation. This causes introverts to be more open-minded to new ideas and ways of thinking, which also gives them huge advantages in fields like science, mathematics, technology, art, fields in which different ideas are encouraged. Not only were some of the greatest inventions made mostly by introverts, most of the greatest mathematicians, scientists, and philosophers, such as Copernicus, Newton, Einstein, Freud, Nietzsche, were all introverts as well. However, due to the prevailing culture of anti-intellectualism in our American society, creativity has become more and more discouraged, and many introverts have begun to repress their creativity in order to conform to American expectations. And considering the fact that most of the technological advances as of recent have come from introverts, this is a major problem. Although creativity is a trait that is often associated with introversion, one trait that is never associated with introversion is leadership skills. However, according to research published by Harvard Business Review, several experiments were performed to test whether introverted bosses were more effective than their extroverted counterparts. One of the experiments involved having 160 college students fold t-shirts in groups of 5, 4 followers and 1 leader. Before the folding, each leader read a statement either praising an introverted leader or an extroverted leader from the past in order to manipulate their minds. In the end, the followers under a quote-unquote introverted leader were able to, on average, fold 28% more t-shirts. Following the experiment, it was stated that some of these quote-unquote extroverted leaders tended to stop their followers in order to suggest a better way to perform the task, while the introverted leaders were more open to the followers' ideas and often motivated them throughout the process. As shown by this experiment, introverts are often better listeners and more inclusive than their extroverted counterparts, qualities that every good leader should have. And if that doesn't convince you, if we look at history, some of the most well-liked leaders, such as George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Gandhi, were all introverts. And although these people lived in very different time periods and solved very different problems, they all had one very big thing in common, and that's that they didn't only listen to their own opinions, but to the opinions of other people. Although extroverts may be more charismatic, when it comes to more productivity as a leader, introverts are the winners. We, as Americans, unfortunately grow up in a society that values extroversion more than anything. Whether it be their natural charisma, their confidence, or their likability, extroverts just seem to have it all. And in the midst of all of this praise given to extroverts, we often don't realize the potential introverts have, and instead assume that they just don't have any. However, in our STEM-driven society and a corrupt and unjust world, we need introverts doing what they do best. Although introverts may always be considered the inferior personality type, it is our job as a society to determine whether or not we want the best for humanity. Thank you.